Hello and welcome once again to Brain Says Strange Things. I'm Patrick, this is my brother Jordan, and this is the podcast where we talk about horror movies. In this episode, we're going to be talking about one of the unquestionable all-time great horror films. It really is terrific. The Exorcist, which just celebrated a 40th anniversary. So the movie's been around quite a long time, and we rewatched it tonight, along with the sequel to The Exorcist, Exorcist II, The Heretic. Heretic?
I think it's Heretic.
Heretic?
Yes.
Yeah. Which is not one of the greatest horror films of all time. But we'll get into that. I did want to start this episode off with just some brief thoughts about The Exorcist. I don't think it's necessary for me to summarize the plot of this movie for anyone watching this.
And we watched the theatrical version, too.
Yes, and that's important to know. Jordan has a great box set of all of the Exorcist films. It includes the original theatrical version, which we watched tonight, as well as the version you've never seen, is what they usually call it.
Released in theaters for their last anniversary? Is that what it was?
Well, it was back in 2000 or so. They released
It's
this.
probably like 2003.
Yeah, maybe
2004.
They released this version
30th
of.
anniversary.
They released this version of The Exorcist with some deleted scenes reinserted and kind of a different ending. But we watched the original, which I think is the superior version.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he has all the Exorcist movies. So we both seen the movie before a few times. I actually hadn't seen it for quite some time. I think the last time I watched it was probably when they did do the version you've never seen in the theaters. So what were just your, you don't have to do a big overall review, but your impressions this most recent viewing of the film? Like, what held up? What were you surprised about? Just what was your kind of off-the-cuff take on The Exorcist?
I hate it. No, I mean, I don't really know a lot to say about it because I think it's a great horror movie. It's probably one of the greatest horror movies.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking it's probably like just quality of film, and I might be forgetting something that is going to make me regret this, but it's probably one of the best, if not the best movie we've reviewed on this show by a pretty wide margin.
That and Texas Chainsaw, they're like...
Yeah, the Texas Chainsaw remake was terrible. So this is a legit good movie. I mean, a lot of the stuff that we review on here is a lot of fun, but this is a really great film.
Have you ever read the novel that it's
No,
based on?
I haven't.
See, I haven't either, so I don't really know anything about that. But I would kind of guess that it follows it pretty closely. I could be completely wrong about that, but it seems like the structure of it seems like a novel.
Yeah,
I'm not a huge reader, but it is kind of like more just about the story, and each character kind of has something to do in the story. They each have their own motivation. It has nothing to do with anybody else. It's like there's no love story. There's they all just kind of all come together, and they each kind of have slightly different point of views about what's going on.
Yeah, they're well-drawn characters.
Yeah, I think it's a really well-told story, and it's so simple, too.
I really agree. And I think I know what you're getting at by saying it's very...
Yeah, make it sound better.
No. I think I know you're getting at, and that it seems sort of novelistic. What I was thinking is it has an almost kind of documentary-like quality, where... even though it's about a fairly fantastic event, and what everyone remembers from The Exorcist is the pretty outrageous stuff like the head spinning and the projectile vomit and the levitating bed, that's all in there. But it takes a long time to get there, and things are presented in a very straightforward, unadorned manner. It doesn't follow the typical structure of a horror film. You know what I mean? It's really a movie about...
They're trying to handle the subject matter really seriously, because I thought about that when she's going to all the doctors, because Reagan is behaving really bizarrely. Anybody, like, a horror audience would think, well, she's possessed. Like, you're so stupid. How can you not? Like, but if you're seriously a doctor, if you actually were a doctor and someone came to you, you would exhaust every single reason. Even if you saw her, like, maybe even levitating up. You would come up with some sort of excuse. to preserve your reputation, maybe.
And that's what this movie is very careful to do and does really, really well, is we're not in a horror movie world. We're in a real, actual world. How do we know we're in a real world? Because we start out filming on location, at least I think on location, in Iraq. And then even the scenes in America are filmed on location, real university, real city. It looks real. And we're not in a world of the supernatural, but the supernatural starts to creep into it. And the movie takes a long time getting, really the mother is one of the central characters, but also the priest. Getting these rational people to a point where they will buy into the supernatural.
That's kind of what I mean too about the characters too. Like that acting is really good.
Excellent, all the way through.
And they all kind of, I don't know what I mean by they all kind of come from their own places. But the only thing that
they each have their own kind of internal story and motivation.
Yeah, it's not like one's trying to save the other so he can try to accomplish a goal. It's just like this little girl is sick. I'm gonna go. Yeah. I mean, he's got his own problems going on there too, but it's not necessarily related to what the hell's
going on. Well, the priest is a great character because he is not. You would think it would be like the priest is all in with the exorcism right away and is the expert on exorcism.
He's got like 1 foot out the door.
And the doctors and the mother like don't believe in exorcism, but it's not that simple. The priest is having himself a crisis of faith. And he himself is trained as a psychologist. So he is very much in one character, kind of represents, this dichotomy.
Kind of like RoboCop. He's a superhero and he's a cop.
He's a great character. So it's all very well done. It takes its time to tell the story. And then once you begin the exorcism, when Max von Sydow shows up as the exorcist at the end of the movie and they go into the room, they really don't cut back and forth. They don't cut back to what the mother's doing while this is happening to the police officer.
There is that part too where they just kind of take a minute out. They're like, all right, let's start again. They both just like sit on the steps and they don't say anything. And you're just kind of like waiting there, and you wait with them, and you get the sense that like this is really happening.
Yeah, it really takes you through the steps of the exorcism, and I have to think this is probably pretty well researched. That this is pretty close.
Probably.
I mean, the fantastic elements with Reagan levitating and stuff, not. But as far as the priest's procedure for what they do during the exorcism, I have to believe it's probably pretty close to reality because there's nothing really outrageous about it. It's basically they read scripture, they throw holy water.
But even like the stuff that seems maybe not outrageous, but almost like you'd laugh at, but because you could probably picture that happening. Like there might be a funny moment. This is what like a lot of stories forget, is that sometimes during a series, when something serious is going on, sometimes something funny could happen. It doesn't mean that it's makes the characters laugh or it's like a joke or anything essentially, but that part where there's like the power of Christ compels you, and they say it over and over again, or it's almost kind of funny,
right? But
they're just like so committed to it, and that's why the actors are really good in it.
And another thing I liked about this movie too is like it wasn't like one thing I often think this about watching like some of the best movies from the 1970s American cinema. It's just you watch these movies and you think, God, could a movie this good even be made today? Like, would this even make it into, like, theaters? Like, I'm not sure that it would, because it's so stripped of any kind of, like, Hollywood artifice, except for maybe one moment at the end. But I like that there wasn't some puzzle to solve. There wasn't some big clue. There wasn't any reason why Reagan was possessed. And as I'm saying all this, we're going to be contrasting all these points with Exorcist II.
But also remember there's the cop character?
Yeah.
And he actually almost figures it out. Like he's not a stupid cop.
Right. He's a good character.
He puts it together. And there's nothing really motivating him either, except his job, which is to find out what happened. It's just like
it's just a very well done,
very simply told, realistic story. I think.
So the one part that takes me out of it a little bit is the end, and it's tough. How do you end a story like this, which supposedly originally is based partly on a true case, etc., etc.?
Got to be very loosely
with Father. Is it Karras? Karras?
Something.
He makes the demon go into him, and then he, jumps out the window. And that was the one kind of movie type moment, I thought.
But even something stupid like that, they set up. You know, that's the way the other guy had died. Like, they figure out that he must have been thrown out this window, and it's set up that there's this huge flight of stairs.
Sure, yeah.
So it's like
it was handled.
It is kind of
it's a minor gripe, but I don't know how else they would have ended the movie. You know what I mean? Because it was so straightforward and so new.
I guess that didn't bother me as much.
Yeah, it didn't really bother me. It was just kind of like, to me, it stood out a little bit. Like, oh, okay, this is like kind of a Hollywood kind of. This is more.
It is a Hollywood movie.
It is, yeah, but this is more of like a movie type ending, and so much of this film was atypical of what you'd see in most movies. So anyway, it was a minor gripe, but yeah, I mean, that was my takeaway from watching it recently. Just being reminded, like, this is a great film, beginning to end. This is excellent. It looks great, well acted, wonderful story, scary, creepy, great classic horror moments. I mean, The Exorcist. We don't need to tell anybody, but we're here telling people that it's a great film.
Mm-hmm. You don't need to tell anybody, but we feel compelled to
We feel compelled to blather on for 10 minutes about how The Exorcist is great. But on its 40th anniversary, it bears repeating.
It's also interesting to contrast it with the sequel.
Very interesting. Ridiculous. So basically everything that The Exorcist did right, The Exorcist II, The Heretic did wrong. And I don't even know where to begin with this movie. It was really bad. So we wanted to do The Exorcist, and we're trying to think like what to pair it up with. Like, we can do another exorcism movie because there's a lot of them. But I have this like sick fondness for sequels to films that should not have had sequels.
I thought it was quaint before, but now it is a sickness.
It is. Well, I feel I may have been cured of it having watched The Exorcist II, The Heretic, which I actually had seen before, like years and years ago.
It's like when they inject you with the disease to get rid of it.
Yeah, I think I'm cured of this compulsion to watch these sequels
for a while. Anyway.
But I mean, I thought this would be bad, but
because that's its reputation.
It's shocking to me how this could be a direct sequel made 4 years later.
Some of the same characters.
So much worse. So much worse. It was an insult to the original film.
It's pretty shockingly bad.
So The Exorcist II, The Heretic, I do think it's worth summarizing, although I don't know that it made a lot of sense, so I'll do my best. So it picks up 4 years later, so Reagan's about like 16. She's like a teenager. And she is hanging out, I guess.
She's literally hanging out.
Yeah, well, yes. Yeah, Reagan has boobs now. That's a big story point. So she spends time in this very modern, like ultra modern.
Hospital?
Well, it's like a facility for people with various kind of mental
autistic
disorders. There's a lot of autistic people there. Reagan goes there because she has all these suppressed memories of what happened to her.
It's like a kid's hospital, essentially.
Yeah, and the doctor that's working with her, oh, it's so stupid, has developed this machine that will allow not only the subject, in this case Reagan, to go back and access her own memories, but for her to draw other people into her memories as well.
That synchronizer.
And then the other thing that's going on is a new character, played by Richard Burton, a new priest, is assigned to investigate the death of Father Merrin, Max von Sydow's character from the first movie. So he goes to track down Reagan, and he has interest in her memories for that reason.
He's the only one that does.
But then it leads to a lot of nonsense about visions of Father Merrin's previous exorcism that he had done.
In Africa. They mentioned that in the first movie.
Yeah, they mentioned it in the first movie with this young boy in Africa who grows up to become James Earl Jones, who Richard Burton goes to track down in Africa for some reason that wasn't really clear. And Reagan is like, apparently has like psychic abilities, like magic,
like superpowers,
like healing powers, because she heals this autistic girl at one point, and she has a little bit of the demon still inside of her, which they refer to as Pazuzu in this movie, even though it was clear that the demon at least claimed to be Satan in the first movie, which made it a lot scarier and a lot better. Here it's some goofy sounding demon named Pazuzu, which I know is a real demon, but it just sounded silly in this movie. This movie was silly. It sounds ridiculous when I'm describing it, but it was ridiculous.
And it doesn't get any better.
No.
The ending is
it's so bad.
Off the rails. Just
so
it doesn't make any sense. But here's the big thing, like, you notice right away, is how fast it goes. It doesn't even give you a chance to catch up.
Right.
It's telling the stupid story really quickly, too.
And it's like the first movie is called The Exorcist, and it takes, and like you said, they have the long hospital scenes, like, building up, getting the characters ready, getting the audience ready to move into the supernatural world. The first scene in this one is an exorcism.
Yep.
You know, they jump right into it. And right away, it looks so cheesy and so lame compared to anything in the first movie. They should have been ashamed of themselves. They should have been like, we can't put this out.
It is almost like everything they do right in the first one, they do wrong.
They film on cheesy sets rather than on location.
They're on a set even when they don't have to be.
Yeah.
When they're on like a street corner, or there's a scene where they're standing outside the hospital and it's a huge green screen behind them. Like, can't you find a bridge with a cityscape in the background or something and film? Like, you just got to go the extra step and do that. It's kind of lazy.
No, and I love and have praised on this show a lot of ultra low budget films that are near and dear to my heart and are very well done. So it's not about not being able to afford to go on location or being able to... It's knowing how...
No, it's just like not caring about filming.
It's knowing how to make a movie look good. And
it's not that it looked cheap, but it
did look cheap.
It looked cheap, but the main problem is that it looked cheesy, which is different than cheap. It looks just so ridiculously over the top. That machine they use to hypnotize people, the synchronizer, it looks like some sci-fi prop from Plan 9 from Outer Space that she keeps in a drawer.
Yeah, the story was terrible, but it also looked terrible. I mean, you could imagine maybe in the hands of a different director, they could have done something with this ridiculous story. It still would have been bad because it was so silly as a sequel to The Exorcist.
Well, I think maybe a different director would have taken his time. I just felt like this just kept going and going. Like, just slow down. No one knows what the hell's going on. No, they figure, like, once you get the credits rolling and it's over.
Well, I said at one point to you, we were trying to figure out what exactly were the motivations. Like we talked about in the first movie.
Yes,
all these characters were. We should really do like a compare and contrast. So first movie, like all the characters are so well drawn, so well defined, like you pointed out. This movie, we were discussing. We're like, what does he want at this point? What is he trying to do? What is she trying to do? And at one point, I said, what would happen right now if everyone just went home?
Yeah, that's a good point.
There was nothing. There were no stakes.
There's nothing at stake.
Yeah,
you could stop at any moment, and yeah, you're right. They could have just like gone home, and nothing would have happened. At that point, Reagan, she collapsed on the floor in the middle of her tap dance routine. That's the only thing that happened to Reagan. Remember the first one where she's vomiting, her head's spinning around, she's vomiting up green slime.
The first one was simple. This girl is possessed. We need to fix this problem. Right? And then other character stories like fed into it, the crisis of faith, etc., etc. This movie, characters were running around doing ridiculous things for no apparent reason. It had something to do with locusts. It had something to do with some goofy hypnotizing machine. It was not good.
And who was the heretic?
Yeah, right. Why is it called the Heretic? The Heretic, whatever. Who is the heretic? Why is it called that? I don't know.
It didn't seem like any of them were being heretical.
Yeah. What do you think is like what was the worst part of this movie? It was so bad from beginning to end.
I think
it's hard to pin it down, but
it is. I think like it did seem like they just didn't care, because I remember when you see there's this scene where she's driving down the road to get Reagan. To save her, I guess. Save her, quote unquote.
Yeah, we don't really know.
They're all rushing back to the original location.
Right.
House,
and it's filmed as though we're supposed to be on the edge of our seat, but we don't know what's going to happen at this house.
And they're acting like there's a time bomb about to blow up, but no one knows what time anything's going to happen, if anything.
It's all very vague.
And then there's a guy on the side of the road. He's been injured. It looks really horrible, too, because it looks like, I don't know, someone just like dropped blood on his face. And she's a doctor, so she needs to stop and help him. And then you cut like 10 seconds later and they're on a plane. Yeah. They're flying home. And I remember you say, you're like, oh, what happened to that guy that I was helping on the side of the road? Oh, never mind.
Right.
And that's the way it goes. It just like speeds by everything. Like,
very sloppy.
That didn't mean anything. They have all this stuff in there that's so unnecessary.
It was very sloppy. For me, like the worst part of this movie, I think like one of the scenes that kind of sums up the tone and everything that was wrong about this movie is the evil, sexy Reagan. at the end. I mean,
that's
one
Jennifer's
point.
Body.
That's one point where you really have to question how seriously the filmmakers were taking this. Although they seem to be playing it pretty straight all the way through.
I think Linda Blair had them in the palm
of
her hand.
At the end of this movie, you've got this like doppelganger of Reagan. Reagan is still there. It's not Reagan possessed. It's like a double of Reagan. I can't explain to you where this double came from.
What is it, imaginary or is it an actual body?
Just now, I'm fearing there's going to be like huge fans of Exorcist II who are going to just like be telling us in the comments like what. But I mean, please do jump in. I mean, every movie is someone's favorite, but for me, the evil, sexy Reagan with the eyeshadow who was like on the bed seducing the priest, and she talked like, like I'm evil Reagan, like. Really? Yeah, this is the direct sequel to The Exorcist? Did you even watch The Exorcist? They did it so well with the scary voice and everything, and it's like, already one sequel in, we're at this point. Like, this is where you should be at, like, 4 or 5 sequels down the line.
Reagan's character was so out of place. She's terrible. Just not good. And, like, God bless Linda Blair for playing in the original one.
Cute girl. Obviously, her place in horror cinema history is secure. But yeah, they maybe
did. She's reading lines. She's on the phone, like, I'm sorry, I stole the synchronizer. Like, that's out of like Flash Gordon.
Who could read that line well? I mean, that's tough. That's tough.
And then every scene she's in, she's wearing like a sexy outfit.
Oh, it was bad.
She's wearing like new pretty clothes. She's wearing a dress and everything. It's like she's like, okay, I looked like crap.
I told you, it's very much like Linda Blair has boobs. It's like that should have been the subtitle. Exorcist II. Linda Blair has boobs. That should have been the subtitle of this movie.
But it's like that too. It's even when she's like standing on top of the building, there's like a shot going around, and she's like, I want to, because she had him in the palm of her hand. She must have, because they can't make the movie without her.
Although they made it without a lot of people.
Except
another one of them. There's so much ridiculous to say about this movie.
I honestly thought you were gonna say that as your worst part. The assistant is now. Yeah. Somehow in the movie.
It's so cheesy. Like, I mean, and again, I get it. It's kind of like the budget. You can't necessarily fault the filmmakers for everything.
Take what you can get.
Take what you can get, but they obviously couldn't get the mother from the first movie, who's such a central character. But there's a very, 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 very minor character in the first movie, which is the assistant to the mother, who has like a couple of scenes, and she brings the priest over one time without the mother knowing about it in the first film. So she's a little bit of a character, but she becomes like the stand-in for the mother in this film. She becomes like a major character.
They're even asking her about other people's memories there.
Right. They're like,
what was the father thinking? And then she explains it like she was standing right there. Like, no, you weren't. You were barely in the movie.
So they took this minor character and gave her a major role simply because she's the only one that could get it. She's the only one that would sign up. Like, now the actors are on board. So this movie is just complete.
And it's funny because the mom's an actress, and they say in the movie that she's away on location.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, like, yeah, she was. She was filming a better movie, probably.
Yeah, so this movie was just, it's just awful. And it was such an insult to The Exorcist. And you get whiplash watching them back to back. It's just like...
Well, even right away, like, you're talking about the stakes. Remember the first thing that I said when the main thing is this priest has to go and save Father... Not Marin. Right. Yeah, Father Marin from the first movie. He has to save his reputation.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, like, the main thing at stake in this movie is Father Marin's reputation.
Right.
I don't care.
It's not quite as compelling about this innocent little girl being possessed.
No.
Yeah.
The powers
but
of
then
good
they kind
and
of they kind of dropped that thread, and then I don't know what their motivation was after that.
It's like you said, they didn't have one.
And it ended in this goofy, way over the top cheeseball.
Well, the original house is destroyed. Yeah. I hope they didn't really destroy the original.
Yeah.
Sets and stuff, but for some reason the town is deserted now. Maybe it's... I mean, you can always explain it in these movies as saying, like, it was the devil. You know?
Right.
It's like, why?
But it wasn't the devil, it was Pazuzu.
It was Pazuzu, you're right. Well, then who is the devil? It
could have been in the first movie he was just claiming to be the devil.
He does lie, they did say that.
Yes, but I like to think, in my world... It was the devil in the first movie, and this second movie...
They go out of their way to say that.
The second movie is not canon. This is not canon, is how I think of it.
Yes.
Because it's
way more... shot out of a canon.
Because it's way more scary if it's the actual devil. Like, I love those 70s movies about the devil. Like, we could have watched this in, like, Rosemary's Baby. Yeah. You know, that's that same thing, like Satan and devil worshippers in the city. Like,
but they knew that, creepy. Too, because they go out of their way to make a specific point. Because that's when he gets really worried.
Right.
He's like... they know it's not a demon at this point. He goes, but she's claiming to be the actual devil. And that's what got him scared, because you're claiming to be the devil, and she also knows all these things about you that she wouldn't normally know. That makes it creepy.
Yeah.
And the other problem that I just remembered is that why it's creepy that Reagan is taken over in the first one is because she's a completely random person.
Yes. Not
she's
explained.
A little girl. It doesn't explain it. She's living in whatever, like a New England town. I don't even remember. They're near like Washington, I think.
Yep. Well, I think they're in Washington State and Georgetown.
Oh, okay. Well, it doesn't really matter, though, because that's the main thing is that she's a little girl. There's no reason why it's a little young girl. Reagan doesn't do anything to summon the demon upon her.
Yep. There's no hint of it.
That's why it's frightening. So as a kid, you're sitting at home, it's like...
It's random.
I could get possessed.
Yeah, and that's always the scariest thing.
And then the second one, they place Reagan in the middle of it. And then they try to make it... The whole plot circles around her and what she does and what happens to her. And that is not at all what the point of the first one.
It's a lot of what a lot of sequels and prequels and remakes do is they try to fill in the gaps, they try to explain. So like the first Exorcist and movies like Halloween are great because there is so much ambiguity. Originally there was no motivation or explanation for Michael Myers and what he did.
And honestly that's usually what makes what I think that's a good obsession to have is all these sequels. I think it kind of breeds a lot of really good creative stuff where you have to kind of fit in the gaps. But this is a horrible example.
But a lot of some are better left alone.
It's a fun idea.
Some are better left alone. So yeah, you're right. There's all this ambiguity and unanswered questions in the original Exorcist. And this one, when they did that first exorcism at the beginning, when they flashed back to Father Merrin and that girl in Africa.
Yeah.
Or no, it wasn't Africa. It was somewhere else. And she was saying, ¿Por qué? ¿Por qué me? Porque, and I was like, oh god, that's what this movie's going to be about.
That's the big line at the end, too.
Yeah, it's like, that's what this movie's going to be about. It's like, why? They're going to explain it. And of course, the explanation is completely goofy, and that there's all these special people around the world that Pazuzu wants to take over. It's just like,
yeah, it's scary. It should be scary because people don't have an answer for it. Like, why is the devil taking me over?
Instead you made some goofy sci-fi movie.
I mean, if they go around inventing all these rules and stuff about the devil and Pazuzu and Kokumo and all these stupid characters that are inserted in there, if they go and make all these rules, it's like, all right, if you say his name 3 times, like Beetlejuice or something, then he comes and possesses you and your soul will be taken to hell. Then it's like, well, just don't say it then.
Right.
It's like...
Yeah, it's just silly.
But this way, it's like there's nothing you can do to prevent it, so it's scary. It just kind of comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And that's why the devil is scary.
Yeah.
It's like, there's no explanation for it.
Yeah, well, I feel like we're kind of taking a sledgehammer to ant at this point with poor Exorcist.
I think it's interesting to compare the two.
It is interesting to look at them back and forth because almost every category that The Exorcist excels in, they completely drop the ball.
Even their trailer. We watched the trailer of it too. It's probably one of the worst trailers they have.
Although it does give you a pretty good idea what you're in for with the movie.
It does represent it well, but it doesn't mean it's good. I mean, it's just as bad.
So if anyone is a fan of Exorcist II the Heretic, don't be shy. Let us know. I'd be genuinely curious to hear a different take on this movie. But for our money, skip it by all means. And rewatch.
Literally, for my money, I bought it.
Rewatch The Exorcist because it really is an excellent film, and they probably should have just let well enough alone. Mm-hmm. So I think we don't need to say anything more. Let's never mention
the devil alone.
Let's never mention The Exorcist II the Heretic again on Brains.
Let's do that hypnotized thing they do in the movie and forget.
I would love if I could be hypnotized with that machine.
Synchronizer,
the movie, yeah. So, okay. Well, I think we'll wrap it up because we're already running a little long here. I was going to ask what other exorcism movies. There's other ones. We'll get into that in future episodes. But we had fun tonight. We loved watching The Exorcist, and I laughed a lot making fun of The Exorcist II, or I should say the movie that dare not speak its name because it's banned now. We can't mention
Kumo versus Pazuzu.
Yeah, we cannot mention anymore. The movie where Linda Blair gets boobs.
Yep. So that's why it's right here.
On that note, we will be back real soon with another episode of Brain Says Strange Things. As always, we appreciate you guys watching and would love any comments down below. And don't forget to find us on Facebook. So we'll see you again real soon. Bye now.
Bye.